Welcome back to the Play by Play Podcast YouTube channel, where we are ending our coverage of NBA free agency with this video today. And look, I know it was supposed to be an episode revolving around every loser in this year's cycle, but I wanted to take some time to speak specifically about the Golden State Warriors and how stuck I feel their franchise is right now. But right before we get into that, I want to encourage you to go down below, subscribe to the channel, as well as comment, leave a like, and share with your friends. And as always, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all those social medias. You will get to see my reaction to breaking news within the NBA and the NFL, and you will never miss whenever the podcast uploads an episode. Without further ado, guys, let's not waste any time. Let's get into this. Now, back to Golden State, because as of right now, they are the only team who has not made a single move in free agency. And to say I was surprised would be an understatement. I was honestly completely speechless, if we're being honest, because the Warriors are really on their last leg right now. Steph Curry is 37 years old, Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green are each 35, and I would almost guarantee that all three of those guys will be off of their roster in 2 years, if not by next year. And when that happens and you still have aging legends that can still play and that have solid value, you normally have two options when it comes to building your roster. Either A, you put all of your eggs in one basket, trade all of your young assets and draft capital, and try to make the best veteran team you can around your main three. Or you thank each of these guys for their services by trading them to contending rosters, gaining young assets, and setting yourself up for the future. And I just feel like Golden State has done neither of those options. And instead, they have done a disservice to their superstars because they're almost flip-flopping between contending and rebuilding. And I'll give you an example, right? In 2019-2020, they had one of the worst records in the league at 15-50, and they were rewarded with the number 2 overall pick. Now, granted, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and even Draymond Green at some points of that season were injured, and so they had to rely on a fairly new and inexperienced backup lineup that ended up gifting them James Wiseman out of Memphis. And at that time, I was thinking to myself, this is huge, right? Because either they are going to completely clear house and rely on their young assets, or James Wiseman is going to be able to be an immediate plug-in center and help them contend for a title. But then that same offseason, they go out and trade for D'Angelo Russell, who at the time was coming off of his best season, leading the Brooklyn Nets to a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. Totally fine, because it made me believe that they were going to contend that season. The problem is they did not perform well and were barely able to sneak into the play-in that year. So in next year's draft, they had 2 lottery picks that ended up being Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. Again, I was ecstatic for them because at the time, Wiseman was coming into his sophomore year, and I was thinking you now have a young core of Jordan Poole, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and James Wiseman. Like, you are secretly building one of the best young cores in the league. Like, none of those guys were starting on their roster yet, and you still had big-time legends like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. But then, following making those rebuilding moves, that same season, they go on to trade D'Angelo Russell for Andrew Wiggins from the Timberwolves to play over Jonathan Kuminga. Do you see where I'm going with this? Now, yes, again, that Wiggins trade paid off, and they were able to make a giant leap the following year and win a title that season. But the point I'm trying to make is instead of committing to one path and instead flip-flopping, it has now led us to the point we're at right now where Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green only have really a year or two left in their careers. But they're not good enough together right now, even with an okay roster surrounding them, to go out and win a title. But they're also too big of a risk with their limited timetable to warrant any real value in the market. So you may think, okay, they have this great young core. Why can't they trade those guys away? The problem with that is Golden State has tried to still contend. The problem is that with Golden State still trying to contend, those younger guys have been pushed down the lineup and haven't really had a real opportunity to develop and sharpen their skills and improve. And that is why not only is a player like Jonathan Kuminga the same player he was when he got drafted, when he should be one of the best young wings in the league, but the Warriors can't get the value that they want for him in an open market. And that is why really the only one that is biting on the fishing pole right now is the Miami Heat. And unfortunately for Golden State, in 3 of the last 4 years, they have faced teams in the first round that pale in comparison to the experience that they've had, where they faced the Denver Nuggets in 2021, the Sacramento Kings in 2023, and the Houston Rockets the previous in this previous season. All three teams that had little to no playoff experiences, but were put at a high seed and in a top position. They tried to play the between game, and because of that, they can't move assets, which means they can't contend as of right now because they're not talented enough. But their future assets also aren't valuable enough for them in the open market because they've pushed them aside to be able to contend. I always think that the Boston Celtics always did it right? Back in, around 2012, 2013, they identified pretty early that guys like Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, big time legends of their franchise who had just recently, gone out and taken them to a 2008 and 2010 NBA Finals appearances. In addition to winning a title in 2008, those guys were on a pretty steady decline. They were not performing as well as they were 3 years before. So what they did was they went out into the open market while those players still held solid value. Yes, they were on the decline, but they were still having solid play. And they went out and they offered them to whoever was really interested. And luckily for them, they had a suitor in the Brooklyn Nets that were willing to give up a load of picks for their big time stars. Jason Terry, we know the infamous trade of Jason Terry, Kevin Garnett, and Paul Pierce to the Brooklyn Nets that ended up netting them 3 first-rounders that would turn into Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Colin Sexton, who would be traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Kyrie Irving, another big time superstar. Not to mention the fact that they got Jason Tatum, they got that third overall pick while they were still in the Eastern Conference Finals that same year in 2017 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, do you understand how ridiculous that is? Not to mention, a year later, they would also trade away Rajon Rondo to the Dallas Mavericks for a guy in Jay Crowder. And single-handedly, they would be able to contend with the assets that they had with guys like Jay Crowder and Marcus Smart and Isaiah Thomas and whatnot, but still be able to have young assets in place to be able to rebuild behind those guys, and didn't have top-heavy talent to allow those rookies to play behind those guys and then take over. And virtually that Kevin Garnett trade, that Paul Pierce trade, that Rajon Rondo trade, that virtually pushed the Boston Celtics into the championship winning team that they had a year or two ago. Like, they just did it the right way. And I'm not here to hate on the Golden State Warriors because they have been one of the most successful franchise for over the last decade, right? I mean, they've had 4 championships in the course of the decade and have appeared to those, what was it, 6 out of the 10 in the last decade? Like, that is incredibly impressive. But I just feel like they held on for too long, and they held on because they did not want to disrespect some of their big time legends, probably the biggest legends in the history of their franchise, and guys like Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And it's going to end up costing them in the future because Kuminga is either not going to be valuable enough on your team, or you're going to have to trade him away. Moody's fine, B-Pot is fine, but even those guys aren't big-time players on your roster. And right now, I mean, Curry, Draymond Green, Jimmy, Quentin Post, TJD, Moses Moody, and Buddy Hield, I mean, is that really a contending type roster? I don't believe so. And that's why, in my opinion, because replacing the losers video with this video was very important, because in my opinion, I feel that the Golden State Warriors are probably the biggest losers of this offseason because they've digged an even deeper hole for themselves, and that has to be the biggest loss of all. But in the end, that's all that I have for you guys today. Let me know down below what you guys think about that. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you think that the Warriors are still in a pretty solid spot? Do you think that they can make one more run at the title? Do you think that they're going to be able to, send off Jonathan Kuminga somewhere and get solid value for them? Let me know about all those down below in the comments, as well as subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing with your friends. And as always, following us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all those social medias. You'll get to see my reaction to breaking news from the NBA and the NFL. And as always, we'll never get to miss for whenever the podcast uploads. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Take it easy. Have a great rest of your week, and peace.